Look, it says we're live. Too bad it catches me in the middle of a sneezing, coughing, general face expulsion
That would be considered clinical
moment.
proof that you're alive, I think.
We gather together.
And so does the pollen.
Oh,
from
good
your
people.
Nose. Good morning.
I will
It's 9-ish, as you can see.
I will happily say that by and large my allergy shots are working right up until yesterday.
Yeah, we just
When I
kind
think
of
they've been overwhelmed.
There.
All
Now we
right.
know it's time to
It's
start
time.
thinking about news of the world. How long do you think we should delay?
Just for like a moment.
Okay.
Good morning, good people. We delay. We delay as we gather. Oh my goodness.
We could delay a bit longer.
That might be prudent.
Dear Prudence.
Shall we?
Okay.
And good ding.
And
ding.
good morning. Ding ding.
Ding.
Today I'm going to be attempting to feminize my voice somewhat once again. And I'll probably drop it most of the time, but what the heck, I'm going to give it a shot. And the name of this program is This Is Now, Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa, and that's Ani Raven.
Good morning.
Good morning. And
just call me Little Sniffles for short.
Yeah, she's pretty sniffy. Well, let me give you some headlines. North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile once again yesterday and splashed it down in international waters near Japan. Too near, really, on purpose, of course. The reason we know that it's an ICBM rather than a less capable rocket, I guess that using that abbreviation may show my age. Intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM.
Is that not used anymore?
Well, I don't know.
Used.
I mean,
I think you can still
that was
say
something everyone said 50 years ago, but it ain't 50 years ago. Anyway, well, it's an ICBM rather than a less capable rocket. It's not just that the Pyongyang government says so, because they'll say anything. They'll say it was lofted by a soccer kick from Kim Jong-un and steered by his farts if they think it'll impress the Americans. But they know that NORAD tracked it for more than half an hour and that it had the speed to go the distance, say, to Portland. I mention this because North Korea has been overrun by back-to-back, year after year, war games adjacent to its territory as the Pentagon attempts a rerun of their successful bankrupt the enemy's military trick that worked during Glasnost. It's a dangerous game, and it won't work. But I want to say why this is so. It did work once against the USSR because in the 80s and 90s, the Russian society was chafing at post-war restrictions and was getting more open. The spreading realization that the West had developed a far more prosperous model was eating at people. And Russians were proud of their technological accomplishments and wanted to know why, if they could put the first person in space and build fleets of ICBMs that were the terror of the West, they could not have a little bit of chicken with the cabbage and potatoes. And Glasnost, under Gorbachev, golly, I've westernized that a little too much. It's not recognizable. Glasnost, under Gorbachev, was trying to address that, but of course not nearly quickly enough.
Glasnost is always what I called it.
Glasnost, yeah. I
mean
Glasnost.
Yeah, yes. Welcome to being from the Northwest.
I think there were American TV programs being smuggled in on their new Soviet VCR players, which are something to behold. They've got tubes. And they're showing well-fed teenagers playing with flashy, loud cars and electric guitars, and it was leaking into the Russian psyche. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff, working with Reagan's maniacally war hawk administration, intentionally provoked and frightened the commies into spending every last ruble on rockets and submarines, convinced the end was nigh. And maybe it was nigh. at least until Reagan watched The Day After on TV, no kidding, and decided against going out in a blaze of radioactive bloody glory. Maybe we should thank Jason Robards for that.
Maybe we should.
So it can't work because that was then and that was them, meaning Russians, who simply were not nearly as isolated and zombified as the North Koreans are now. Don't get me wrong, they had loads of rotten Comintern propaganda in their heads, but there are matters of degree. Russians had varying ideas of Gorbachev and the leadership in general, but they didn't go around singing carols to him as the incarnation of a demigod. And that's what the North Koreans do. It's not the same, and it can't work, which may be why it's pretty much kept secret from the American people that so much money and so many deadly nuclear threats are being hurled at those people every damn day. The whole idea is to make them even crazier and to provoke them. The North Koreans may or may not be able to launch and detonate a nuke or two on American soil. That would be horrible. It's quite a trick. Little known fact, the Americans have only actually launched an ICBM and detonated a nuke from it once. There was only one test because that's the most provocative thing, of course, you can possibly do, even though it was done with plenty of notification
Boy, howdy.
to the Russians. One ICBM has been launched from American soil and bombed near an island somewhere in the middle of, well, that part of the Pacific that's sort of officially in the middle of nowhere where they, throw Skylab and all sorts of space junk when they feel like it. It's very hard to do. The North Korean nukes are pretty, it's amazing they can do that, considering the level of poverty that they have. And what I'm getting around to saying is it's really not much of a threat. I mean, technically, it's a horrible threat. But in practice, I mean, for example, it's a big deal that they've got a solid fuel rocket, and solid fuel rockets can be sent off at a moment's notice. Solid fuel rockets are used all over the world, shot from ships and airplanes, but really big solid fuel rockets are hard to maintain. One of the reasons being that if you put a whole lot of solid fuel together in one place, you really have to watch it because it just tends to explode. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't just, it's just not, the more you put in, the less stable it is. So it's something they can manage. I don't know. I mean, the North Koreans can kill 1 million people within a matter of hours with their poison gas and tunnels and artillery. And I think it's just plain rotten and racist to boot that the United States, I make fun of their society, but it's just like a QAnon society. Americans are perfectly capable of being just as stupid, demonstratedly. For these war games, I guess the Koreans generally, and the South Koreans, who would be the ones to die, just aren't white enough to matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm saying it's racist, it's disgusting, it's evil, and we never talk about it. We just give billions to the Pentagon and let them do this insane thing on the 45th parallel or 48th or whichever it is. And it's time we started talking about it on this side of the Pacific and demanding that the brass hats put a stop to it now. Speaking of war, I haven't been saying nearly as much about Ukraine as I'd like to, because like the situation with Korea, the game is so deep, bloody, and complex. It's hard not to just make things worse. You can tell the truth sometimes in detail, and it confuses people. So, where do you go with that? But I do want to see an end to the war, and it's the Russians that need to take the first steps to make that happen. And although I don't have a magic spyglass to see through the fog of war, I can see that we're being bamboozled on this side as well. And that theft of secret materials by the kid who wanted to impress his friends on his, war games Discord.
Yes.
Discord.
Discord server
kind of showed that things aren't quite the way we were being told. This talk of Russia giving back the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea is nonsense for a start. Prince Grigory Potemkin, known for sharing Catherine the Great's vodka and bed sheets. The guy who created Potemkin villages to impress Catherine.
I was going to say Potemkin. I think I've heard his name before.
As in Battleship Potemkin. He started the whole thing 240 years ago. And it's bigger than much bigger than Pearl Harbor to the Russians. They're not going to give it up no matter what. it's as Russian as snow and public scowling. It isn't going anywhere. And it doesn't matter that it's not right that the Russians should keep it. I do think it is right to give the Ukrainians lots of ammunition and anti-tank rockets and modern tanks and logistics, because everyone has a right and a duty to repel invaders on their territory, especially the way the Russians are being with their horrible punishing attitude and this idea that they just have the right to torture and obliterate the Ukrainians for being on the wrong side of history and all these goofy ideas that are in their mind. I hope that Putin's war collapses. I hope that the war itself collapses the homophobic, sexist Putin regime. But there's a nasty chance that the Russians will just hold on to a big chunk of eastern Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula, no matter if they have to pull the artillery rounds in through the mud with goat carts. They're not going to give that up. So it needs to be thought about rationally, is my big point, aside from the one in my head. As I was saying, that's a lot of talking, isn't it? This is now Bridge to a Better World. That's Ani.
Hi there.
She doesn't have as much to say because she's been mostly sneezing and coughing this morning.
It's true. It's true. The my springtime head has knocked most thoughts straight out of it. But I do have good news. Keep going. I think it'll fit. It'll go
With
well.
Clarence
It'll
Thomas.
go well
Okay,
after
well-
Clarence Thomas.
Okay, well, I remember when Clarence Thomas was being...
And thank you again, dear public, for your patience with my sinuses.
when he was getting his clearance, and that was under George Bush the Greater, and it was insulting and it was maddening, because the idea was, here's your new Thurgood Marshall, here's your new, Brown v. Board Titan who's going to be on the Supreme Court and take that seat when he died, and it was just so obvious the man was a putz. And
What was our first clue? Anita Hill?
yeah, and it's obvious he's a shill for the grossest reactionary pigs like Strom Thurmond, who loved him, and that he was a pervert. His own law clerk, Anita Hill, took the stand and spoke against him, which is to speak those details publicly and to be known only for that must have been the hardest thing in the world. Meanwhile, the staunchly racist Republican Party used the occasion to gleefully throw the term racist back at everyone who had ever used the term against them, which is to say just about everybody. And that gloomy man was installed in the highest court in the land, where he was and remains utterly untouchable. So it doesn't really surprise me to see that he is grossly corrupt as well, and nor will I be surprised when Tucker Carlson starts saying that everyone who points out that Justice Thomas is corrupt is really doing it out of a secret commie, Satanist, transsexual, Antifa racism. If he hasn't said it already, I'll really be surprised. I mean, I was typing the script Thursday night, and I thought he's probably already said that. But speaking of race relations, there's been a bit more talk about the real meaning of the Second Amendment, and I'm glad to see that. And it's time we need to talk about that, because Clarence Thomas has everything to do with race relations in the United States and with the abortion, with the destruction of the right to healthcare and abortion. And of course, he was lying when he took the stand, saying that he had no intention of destroying Roe v. Wade. That's obvious now too. And he's so weirdly conservative. He wants to wipe out mixed race marriage. Now, the man has a mixed race marriage, and that's how crazy he is. The Second Amendment, though, is still in place and as effective as it ever was, because the whole idea of the Second Amendment was, as was said on Democracy Now! Yesterday very eloquently, and now I can't remember her name.
Carol Anderson.
Carol Anderson. It was a sop to the southern states so that they could keep their militias to keep the slaves in check. The Second Amendment is for slave catching. It's time we say that and face this ugliness. The idea is that it somehow keeps the peace, and it does function for white people to intimidate black people, even though it's technically possible for black people to get guns. We see it over and over again in public whenever a gun is wielded in the presence of a cop. If it's a white man, they talk him down. If it's a black man, that's an excuse to shoot him 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's these various kooky mythologies around the Second Amendment, and I have to admit that I bought into it for many, many years, and I thought that it was a good thing, and maybe an instant militia could be raised against a tyrannical government. This is horseshit. I mean, this is.
I believe when we met, that was some of our first arguments, and I
Yeah.
would say to you, "Are you going to get a pocket nuke?" Because
Yeah, I mean, how far would you go? I mean, yeah, sure, flamethrower, and flamethrowers
Still
are
not-
legal in Oregon, by the way.
Jesus, but that's not a pocket nuke.
And you know, when
Just
it comes to having guns for shooting back at the reactionaries, at the Proud Boys, well, it is kind of necessary now, isn't it? But not because of the fucking Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is just for keeping slaves, and I refuse to say I support the Second Amendment because I'm not going to hold. I do have a rifle, and I'm not going to hold that rifle saying that it is some right that I have because I'm a leftist. The cops here know that I'm a leftist, and if they ever see me with that rifle, they'll shoot me dead instantly. It's not useful against the state except as a gesture of saying that, yeah, I can blow a hole in your stupid ballistic vest. That's what it's about. So, you know, down with the Second Amendment, and pardon me for stating the obvious, but if we want peace, we should pay reparations to BIPOC, to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We should pay reparations. That's how you get peace.
Okay.
And then there's abortion. And I thought maybe you'd want to
I
talk
just, I think I got lost somewhere in that, but that's
about,
that's
hard to follow my logic on that.
yeah. I'm sorry.
What I'm saying
And
is,
it might just be me, but I, you know, if I can just maybe back and forth with you, what you're saying is that there is a need for self-defense within communities, especially marginalized communities, because marginalized communities are under attack.
yeah,
And the idea that the well-regulated militia to defend against tyranny, as you know, talked about in the Second Amendment, that idea is fraught,
yeah,
and
it's horseshit. And
it
it's time we admit it.
right? Okay, right. And when it comes to defending of our communities, I think we can still agree we don't need frickin' assault rifles. We don't need AKs. We don't need weapons of war. And I just want us to be very clear on that because I got a little lost.
Yeah, and well, I'm pointing out the contradiction too that I keep that.
You don't keep an AK. Let's
No.
be clear.
No, I keep a freaking cannon. But I mean, it's not a cannon.
It's not.
But
Oh my God. Okay.
but that's a reaction. That's because we have this slave catcher militia effectively in place with the cops and with all their right-wing supporters with their piles and piles of NRA approved guns. So it's because of that situation, and only because of that situation, that I find it necessary to have a rifle. And as I was saying, that rifle isn't actually going to ever defend me. It's not ever going to keep me from dying. At this point, it's basically a symbol. And you know, and it's a threat. It's a statement saying, you know, if you attack my house with your ballistic vest and your AK, you may suffer for it.
Yeah. Okay. I am acutely uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say,
I think you
acutely
should be.
uncomfortable
You should-
talking about this.
I think you should be.
I
think
just
you should
am.
stay uncomfortable about it.
Okay, cool.
I think
Move
it's
on.
yeah.
What else do you have to say?
Well, and then, you know, as I was saying, they put in Clarence because the whole deal was they were going to destroy Roe v. Wade, and that's how white people excuse the ugly things they do. When I say white people, in this case, I'm talking about the evangelicals. This is how evangelicals excuse all the ugly things that they support and that they overlook. They say that they are on the side of God because they're protecting the purest, most innocent life on earth, the ovum that has just been activated by a sperm. This is a really silly idea. It's Kim Jong-un silly to say that, you know, this tiny speck is the equivalent of a living, breathing human. But that doesn't matter because there's a cult that's been built around it. And the cult, the purpose of the cult is to make evangelicals feel better about being the racist, transphobic, sexist pigs that they are. That's what its function has always been. But now, as I've said before, the dog chasing the car has finally caught the car, and what's it going to do now? Bite the tire? The fun's out of it. And the thing is, once Roe v. Wade is actually down, it becomes damage to the Republicans, and so they are just chasing their own tails, trying to find a way to say, "Oh, we're on the side of God and against abortion," but they know that if they say we support a national ban on abortion, uh, in the presidential race, they will lose the presidential race. So it's interesting how it all works out. It's like under these circumstances, now it's possible to see what the anti-abortion mania was really about, and it was never about protecting children. We knew that. But we can see how it functioned, and now it's just not going to work anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And Clarence Thomas is not going to give up his seat. It doesn't matter that we've called him out for corruption. He doesn't give a damn about that. He doesn't, I mean, going around in that Bombardier 5,000 jet, that's a jet that costs, I looked it up, it costs something like $30 to $50 million. It costs $8,000 an hour. It costs you $3 million a year just to keep it. He runs around with the super rich because he belongs to the super rich, and his loyalty is to them. He's comfortable with that, and he knows that he is untouchable at this point. So I think it's a good idea to use the fact that his corruption has come out in public to show just how corrupt the Supreme Court is right now. Because the only thing that can be done at this point is to pack the court or impeach him, and none of that can be done immediately. Because of the gerrymandering and the apartheid rule of the Republicans, that has to be addressed directly. So that's another funny thing. It's like I want to talk about using a democratic process and getting people out to vote. It's super necessary, and it's also been historically used as a cover for the fact that the super rich, like Harlan Crow, rule us, and what they say goes no matter what. So maybe times could be a changing if we keep our focus on what is actually happening. It's, and that's the irony. We need to get out and vote, and voting is intentionally so restricted as to be nearly meaningless. So now I've finally said everything I have to say about the events of this week.
Well, one thing that I just wanted to make sure got out there as well is Minnesota Democrats are advancing a bill to ban election interference by multinational corporations. This is one of those things that is such a long time coming. To get corporate influence out of politics has been a goal of mine. Oh my God, most of my adult life. Let's 30, 33, 34 years I've been focusing on that. And it heartens me to hear that campaigners have let me just read this. Campaigners who have long pushed cities and states to adopt bans on foreign corporate interference in elections applauded Friday after the Minnesota House of Representatives passed legislations that would make the state the first to prohibit foreign influenced corporations from spending money on electoral campaigns. So this is the foreign-owned multinationals that come in and dump money in U.S. campaigns. Now, I see this as a first step in actually just calling out corporations and corporate power. So I'm going to go ahead. This is an article by Julia Conley published in Common Dreams today. She writes, the provision is part of the Democracy for the People Act, which passed 70 to 57 along party lines on Thursday night, several hours after several hours of debate. The national nonprofit organization Free Speech for People successfully advocated for Democrats in the state house to include the new rule, which would prohibit companies with at least 5% ownership stake by multiple foreign owners or a 1% stake by a single foreign owner from spending money in Minnesota state and local elections. Companies would also be barred from donating to super PACs. The multinational corporations, says Alexandria Flores Quilty, she's a campaigner at the Free Speech for the People. She says multinational corporations are corrupting representative democracy by drowning out the voices of the people. The Democracy for the People Act will help put power back in the hands of Minnesota citizens. The organization has pushed lawmakers in Seattle to pass similar legislation in 2020. Also, Hawaii, California, Washington, New York, and Massachusetts are all considering state level bans modeled on a proposal developed by Free Speech for the People. So,
And against that, we
there's
have
that.
this corrupt Supreme Court, which says that money is speech.
Right. So what I'm seeing is this is one of the first really solid state votes to call out the fact that corporate influence, and in this case specifically multinational corporate influence, but I see it again as a gateway bill to call out corporate influence in elections, and of course we'll have to take
It's
it
great. I love the language of it.
to
It draws people's attention to what actually happened.
yeah, absolutely. Eventually we'll have to take it to repeal of Citizens United
I would certainly like to
and
see
corporate
that.
personhood. But still, I am heartened. I think this is a great first step.
Well, and to respond to the comments, John, thank you for saying just be you. Actually, that's what I'm trying to do. And when I was taking my most recent voice training session, there was a minute or two, it happened when I was mimicking my voice coach. And I almost got my voice just where it needs to be pitched. And it was so liberating, and it was me. And it's going to sound very strange. And the thing is, the voice, I discovered this is another thing that I've discovered by being transgender and trying to be my true self. Our voice, all of our voices are very gendered. And I thought that my voice was just a flat affect and only slightly gendered. This is not true. It is men work hard at, as they are boys, mostly without thinking about it, to imitate the voice patterns that we consider male. And these, I could say a lot about the connection with the psyche, and I found that to be deep and very difficult to approach. So yes, I am actually trying to be myself. I'm trying to find my voice, and for those few seconds, I felt such liberation. It's like I heard me for the first time since, I don't know, 1970. There I was, and it's gone now, and I can get kind of close to it, and I can sound strained, or I can drop back to a lower pitch and a flatter affect, but I'll get there. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be myself.
Well, I also want to put out there in my long-term feminist ways that gender is socially constructed.
It really is.
And so when you say, that people who are apparently male in childhood, model their voices after male patterns per society, because again, there's individual variation between societies, or variations in between societies as to how pitch is modulated, how sing-song is a voice, how some societies do not have men have a flat affect, but English certainly does.
It
Or at
certainly
least
does.
American English does.
And
And particularly Southwestern American English, where from you hail.
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And it's funny, reconstructing myself that way is just so difficult, because that's something that I use to construct, my perceived gender, and it worked pretty well for me for a long time.
Radio. So is there more that you wanted to throw in there?
I feel like I've said everything I can possibly
Okay.
off over my mind today. I don't feel like I'm holding back.
I don't think you are. Let's go ahead and get into some tarot, shall
Let's
we?
do it. What does tarot say to you today?
Well, tarot says what we got here is the King of Pentacles. And we got here the Nine of Cups. It's inversed. And the Ace of Cups, also inversed. Right. Okay. That's what we got. So, what does this say, you might ask? The King of Pentacles talks about actually attaining a success, having things go well for you, having things be a having things be fulfilled. Some goals have been accomplished, and this is good. You should, in fact, enjoy them, and at the same time, make sure you're looking around at the impact you've had. It's possible that you have lost some connectivity with friends and family. It's possible this week that we need to focus on renewing the spirit and renewing connections, because those goals, sometimes when we really set forth and we are so focused on getting something that we desire, whether that's something like a degree or certificate, a training sort of thing, or if it's a purchase, like we really just need that new computer or whatever it is, um, that sometimes we get so very focused on that we start to disconnect. And that's ultimately not good. Like there are times we need to focus in, but once we do that, make sure that that you look around and see what has been neglected, because it's all a balancing act, isn't it? It's always a balancing act. So as you attain for yourself, it's also important to pay it forward and make sure you're always giving back and strengthening success of others in your peer group, in your friends and family. And make sure you are taking time to renew the spirit, renew your connection to your own heart and your own source of joy. Um, as we are getting into some sunny afternoons, getting out and actually being able to connect to the natural world, to hear the robin song, and to know that spring is here and spring brings renewal is an important thing. Uh, so, in short, congratulations on our successes, on your successes. You have attained, and it's been a long time coming, and that's cool. And at the same time, look around and see what has been neglected, build bridges, and continue to support each other. That's what we got. And so, with that, we have that's about it. With that, we have to bid you adieu. Please do like this video. As you watch it, please do hit the like button. Leave comments below to let us know what's on your mind, what you're thinking about these topics. How do
Yeah.
you feel about
Thanks for the comments, Neil.
gender and what do we call that, multinational corruption in politics? How do you feel about any of these things? How do you feel about the abortion struggle? How do we actually sustain mutual aid so we can get on with the general strike? All of these things, these questions I have, go ahead and make some comments below. Hit the notification bell so that you actually can know when we are on the air and get a little reminder. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already.
Good to see you again, so to speak, and our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.